Hello, this is Paranormal Girl, and today I'm going to talk about a UFO story that happened in Wales a few years ago. And it was based on a book that I read some years ago. It was called The Uninvited by Clive Harold. It was a story based on a Welsh dairy farm, and they witnessed many UFO sightings, including a visit from the very infamous Men in Black. It reads, "This story is true. You'll wish it wasn't." And if you can get a copy of this on Amazon, I suggest you try and read it. It is quite a frightening story. But let's have a look at the actual story and what happened. And I found a lovely website here. I'm going to give them full credit for what I'm going to read out. And I'll leave a link to this page in the description. So it reads, "The West Wales flap of 1977 is second only to the Warminster thing in British UFO history. Documents released in 2005 have revealed how a secret military investigation has launched into claims that alien craft and their tall humanoid occupants were taking a particular interest in the Welsh coastland. David Clarke investigates." The death in 2003 of veteran Welsh ufologist Randall Jones Pugh passed without notice within the UK UFO community. But less than 3 decades ago, Pugh, a retired vet, was a leading spokesman for the subject and the key promoter of Britain's hottest new UFO flap that was focused upon a strip of rugged coastline within the Pembroke National Park near Pugh's home, which became, for a short time in 1977, the scene of strange encounters which made national headlines. Earlier in the year, Pugh, in an interview for a local paper, discussed sightings in 1976 and predicted there soon would be a spate of similar events in West Wales. But even he was not prepared for what happened next. During lunchtime on the 4th of February, 15 school children at Broadhaven Primary School said they watched a silver cigar-shaped UFO in fields behind their school. Some of the group, aged from 9 to 11 years, claimed they saw a silver man with pointed ears emerge from the craft. The stories were dismissed as fantasy, but the children were so adamant that they had seen something unusual. They headed in a petition to the police station. The head teacher later asked them to draw the UFO and was amazed how similar the pictures were. Randall Pugh was instrumental in bringing the story to the attention of the media, and it became an overnight sensation. Journalists and TV crews flocked to the Welsh coast from all corners of the UK. Flying saucers were soon the main topic of the conversation in the Principality. By May, straightforward lights in the sky had been replaced by stories of giant humanoid figures in spacesuits, similar to those used by astronauts, seen prowling around remote countryside late at night. A whole gamut of Fortean phenomena appeared to cluster around the Coombs family at Ripperston Farm. Here, a dairyman, Billy Coombs, and his wife Pauline and their 5 children told of a repeated close encounters with UFOs and their occupants, which left a trail of burnt-out cars and TV sets and spiralling electricity bills. Pauline had a sighting almost every month, and on one occasion the car she was using to drive her children along a country lane was pursued by a fiery object shaped like a rugby football. Later the couple claimed a herd of cows were inexplicably teleported from a locked field into an adjacent farmyard. But the most terrifying incident of all happened in the early hours of the 23rd of April as the couple watched a late movie. Suddenly, they were terrified by the appearance of a 7-foot tall figure in a spacesuit. whose blank face was framed in the window of their sitting room. While later investigators were skeptical of some or more sensational claims, others were impressed by the genuine terror displayed by the couple at the time. Indeed, the policeman who responded to their 999 call said in 1996 that in all his 26 years service, that was the most frightened family I have ever been to see. There was no doubt the couple had seen something unusual, but what? The weird events at Ripperston Farm were chronicled in 3 books, one of which, The Welsh Triangle by Peter Paget, had been partially inspired by the Sun headline Spaceman, Mystery of the Terror Triangle. What exactly constituted the Welsh version of the Bermuda Triangle was never entirely clear, but it included most of the southeast corner of St Bride's Bay, along with the town of Milford Haven and Haverford West. The third and last book to chronicle the Welsh weirdness was the Dyfed Enigma, produced by Pew in collaboration with the cryptozoologist Ted Holliday, which linked the UFO stories with Welsh fairy folklore and ley lines. Journalist Hugh Turnbull, who chronicled the events for the local weekly Western Telegraph, told me his pet theory was that something military lay behind the sightings. A more extreme version, favoured by Paget, was that aliens had established an underground base beneath the Stack Rocks in St Bride's Bay, where UFOs had been seen to hover and disappear. This form of speculation, shared by some local people, was founded on the fact that within a 20-mile radius of Broadhaven, where many of the reports were concentrated, there was a range of military bases. To the north was the top-secret rocket testing station at Aberporth, while Brodie, near St David's, trained pilots at Hawker Hunters, and housed both a tactical weapons unit and US Navy underwater research station. In reality, a unit which tracked the movements of Soviet submarines using a network of microphones. RAF squadron leader Tim Webb, who oversaw pilot training from the base, said the description of the suits worn by the spacemen did not match anything used by base personnel. By a curious coincidence, Webb's son Michael happened to be one of the youngsters who claimed they saw a UFO land behind the primary school at Broadhaven. I believe him implicitly, he told the Observer at the time. I've yet to see a UFO, but I think there has been something supernatural or paranormal. Heady words for an RAF spokesman who would normally be expected to debunk sightings of flying saucers. Meanwhile, demands were increasing for an official inquiry into the West Wales UFOs. One witness, hotelier Rosa Granville, asked her MP Nicholas Edwards, later to become Welsh Secretary in Mrs Thatcher's cabinet, to demand answers from the Ministry of Defence. Mrs Granville ran the Haven Fort Hotel, which stands in a dramatic location overlooking St Bride's Bay. Although she was aware of a legend about a white lady, a ghost haunting the grounds, this did not prepare her for the events on the 19th of April 1977. In the early hours of that morning, Mrs Granville was disturbed by a strange buzzing noise, and on looking out saw an oval-shaped brightly lit UFO and 2 human-like figures in boiler suits that appeared to be measuring something. The following day she found a flattened area of grass in the area which emerged overlooked a field which contained a bunker used by the Royal Observer Corps. Within days of the MP's intervention, a squadron leader from the RAF Brodie visited the hotel to interview the owners. According to their account, he told them there was absolutely nothing at RAF Brawdy that could account for the UFO. Mrs. Granville claimed he asked me not to say anything about the incident to anyone, as he thought it was best not to alarm the general public. However, in his reply to the MP, the Parliamentary Under Secretary for Defence, James Wellbeloved, said that apart from Mrs. Granville's report, the MOD had no record of an unusual activity in the area. And I think that was a cover-up. But behind the public platitudes, it seems a discreet investigation was indeed going on, hidden even from the politicians. From the 14th of June 1977, the head of S4A, the MOD branch which dealt with UFOs, took the unusual step of asking the RAF police, in the form of Provost and Security Services, P&SS, to make a discreet inquiry into the events in Wales. The P&SS are responsible for police in the RAF and have a section which investigates complaints about low-flying aircraft. Early in 1977, they moved to a secretive facility deep in the Wiltshire countryside called RAF Rudloe Manor. UFO authors Tim Good and Nick Redfern have claimed that Rudloe, rather than UFO Desk in Whitehall, has for many years been the real HQ for the British government's UFO task force. The papers released this year throw new light on claims of a conspiracy involving Rudloe Manor. While they do support the claim that P&SS were involved in secret UFO work, they suggest it was hardly a priority for them. In their letter to P&SS, the MOD wrote, "We have not invoked the assistance of P&SS before on UFOs, and the last thing I want to do is involve you in extraneous problems which would divert you from your more immediate work on low-flying complaints." It goes on to ask them to assess the volume of local interest or alarm, and whether there is a readily discernible rational explanation, or whether there is a prima facie evidence for a more serious specialist inquiry. And the writer went on to some length to emphasise his request, and it must be treated in confidence, adding, "I have not even told the minister I am consulting you." Due to the covert nature of the investigation, no final report on the P&SS investigation of events in the Welsh Triangle has survived. But in December 1977, in a secret briefing on UFO policy submitted to the MOD's Defence Intelligence Staff, the head of S4 wrote, "There is always a steady public interest in UFOs, and from time to time it tends to increase unaccountably. In the summer, there were some concerns in Wales, although the RAF police thought this could have been the work of a practical joker." I don't think so, somehow. The fact that the inquiries led to the RAF police to suspect a hoaxer may have been responsible for some of the Welsh UFOs fits with a strong local rumour that persists to this day. Hilary Evans, who debunks some of the more exaggerated stories in an article published in 1982, heard that two members of a round table club were responsible for the sightings of a spaceman at Haven Fort Hotel and Ripperston Farm. They came up with the idea after borrowing silver-lined asbestos suits worn by local oil refinery workers for a fancy dress evening in Broadhaven shortly after the children's sighting. In 1996, BBC presenter Ray Gosling tracked down one of the jokers for a Radio 4 documentary in the West Wales flap. Shortly afterwards, Glyn Edwards, a member of the Milford Havens Round Table, confessed his part in the Western Mail. He described the spaceman outfit as having a solid inbuilt helmet, so I would have looked about 7 foot tall. Alien sightings were all the rage, so I took a stroll around for a bit of fun. I remember when I visited the garden of a certain lady who later called the police that I had to dive into a hedge because she appeared to be aiming a rifle or a shotgun at me. But despite all Gosling's attempt To persuade the witnesses from Broadhaven School to confess, the boys, now in their 40s, stuck doggedly by their story. One of them, David Davis, told him, "I did see something unexplained that day, and I will stick to that story for the rest of my life. The Welsh Triangle may hold on to its secrets for some years to come." So let's get back to this book here. So what actually happened was, it wasn't only the alien sighting at the window of the farmhouse. They also had visits from the men in black, which absolutely terrorized the wife. Not only did that happen, the TV stopped working. They actually blew. Lights would flicker and then go out. Light bulbs would explode. Now, if this was a hoax, there is no way that would have happened. Also, don't forget, he was a dairy farmer, and his cows mysteriously transported from one field into farmland adjacent to him. All the gates were locked. There was nobody upon nobody in that area that would have opened those gates, only him. Now, he protected his cows, obviously, because he was a dairy farmer. That was his livelihood. So why would he pull a prank like that? He wouldn't, would he? And like I said, there were not only just a few witnesses, there were many, many witnesses. The lady in question of the farm, she was absolutely terrified. Her husband went out one day to work on the fields with the cows. She saw this being peering at her through the window. She called the police and managed to call for her husband, and then mysteriously the men in black appeared. And there was one such occasion where they came into the house, because she didn't actually know who they were at the time, and they sat down, and they were in identical black suits. They had no eyebrows. They spoke very robotically, no expressions on their faces. She knew something was off with them. It absolutely terrified her, to the point where she knew they weren't even from this planet. They weren't terrestrial by far. They paid a few visits, and strangely enough, they always turned up in some kind of black Cadillac kind of car. No number plates as well. That was another thing that I remember reading in the book. There were no number plates on this car. The car was very out of place. It wasn't even a car of the year or era or area. It was an American car. The suits were, again, they were oddly dressed in these black suits, and they wore fedoras, the classic hat that the men in black do wear. She even noticed that they were asking many, many questions about the sightings. Now, again, if this was a hoax, they wouldn't be that intense with their questioning with her. And even to this day, I don't think she's alive anymore. I'm sure she's passed on. But even now, reading the book, it is a very terrifying story. So if you can get a hold of this book, I suggest you read it. It is quite an eye-opener, and it explains a lot more than this page that I found here, which is equally as good. And it's a good little site, and I will leave the description if you wish to read it. But again, if you've seen a UFO, leave a comment below. I'd be very interested to know what your take on this story is. And I will finish off with another page that I found about the Ripperston farmhouse UFO phenomena, and it's called the British Roswell. And this is actually written March the 16th, 2019. Although the UFO activity seen at Ripperston farmhouse happened some time ago, which was in 1977, it's probably one of the most important events seen in Britain. I'll actually blow this up for you all to see. And whilst it's not as famous as the Roswell incident many years earlier, it certainly warrants a great deal more attention. My brother Nigel Brockwell, who has an interest in UFOs and the paranormal for many years, was taking a holiday in Wales when he read about the Ripeston farmhouse. He had decided on a more scenic route for his journey and took him close to the farm. Not knowing what response he would receive, he decided to call in at the farm for a chat with the occupants. He was greeted by Mrs. Pauline Coombs, who invited him in, so she is still here. And she introduced him to her husband Billy. Which struck Nigel the most was the couple's apparent honesty about the information they were given and their lack of interest in profiting from the story, which is quite a rare thing these days. It should be pointed out the UFO activity around the farm was not a one-off event, but a series of experiences that occurred between mid-January and mid-December of 1977. Although the Ripeston farm is situated in a rather isolated area of South Wales, there were a number of high security, perhaps top secret, military bases close by. According to the records, UFOs were reported over these bases and the military were involved in some very unusual activities and searches. The Ripeston farmhouse story began on the 14th of January 1977 when Pauline Coombe saw a great ball of incandescent light hanging motionless over the field near the cliff top. It was not unusual to see strange lights in the sky because of the military activity, but this was different. After approximately 20 minutes, the light started to move, swinging from side to side, much like a pendulum, as it got nearer to the ground and disappearing below the cliff. Pauline woke up her husband, who was sleeping in a chair at the time, and he went to the cliff top path to search for whatever the object was. Unfortunately, he found nothing. The following day, the newspapers were carrying the story of UFO sightings, although Billy didn't really believe that his wife's light was a flying saucer. He did admit that there were some strange things going on. He was quoted as saying there were many as 50 frogmen below the cliff, unmarked army trucks, soldiers in camouflage. The Navy was there too, building some sort of path beneath the water. That does not make sense. Clinton, Pauline's elder son, commented on a strange humming noise coming from inside the bathroom window, which would enter and fill the whole room. 2 schoolboys claimed to have seen a dome-shaped UFO with pulsating green and yellow lights hovering over a building in Haverfordwest. They also approached blue light in a field near their school, which flew off at speeds when they got nearer. 14 other schoolboys who saw a landed UFO near their school and a silver figure near the craft. They described the craft as having 10 or 11 windows and a kind of ramp leading from a door. One Friday evening, as Pauline and Billy were watching a movie on television, Pauline was distracted by a flickering light in the window and whining of their dog Blackie. The light was still there after an hour, and Billy, who had fallen asleep, was woken by what he thought was car headlights. Then he noticed a shimmering figure of a man at the window. The figure was wearing a silver suit and apparently 7 foot tall. It didn't move and just seemed to be staring inside. Billy commented that there was only blackness where the face should have been, and it sounded as if the man at the window was wearing a helmet with a shaded visor, much like astronauts would use. A little while later, the figure at the window raised a gloved hand to the glass, which started to rattle. At the same time, the lights dimmed and the television stopped working. Billy managed to call his neighbour and the police, and when the police siren could be heard approaching the farm, the figure vanished. The following morning, Pauline discovered a scorched rose bush in the flower bed and huge footprints beneath the window. A newspaper reported a sighting involving a jelly mold-shaped UFO in a garden near the farm, which was said to be 15 feet high and 50 feet wide. Shortly after reading this in the newspaper, Pauline's friend Rosa telephoned to say that she had seen a dome-shaped UFO in a field near the hotel where she worked. It produced a light, and two tall human-like figures got out and appeared to be searching for something on the ground. The description of the figures seemed to match the one at Pauline and Billy's window. Rosa said that the figures returned to the craft after about 20 minutes, and it flew off at a great speed in the direction of the farm. Sightings of dome-shaped UFOs and figures in silver suits continued, and on one occasion the Coombs' son Kieran claimed to see a tall, dark, fluid-like shape in the front room of their farmhouse. However, a sighting on the 12th of November was perhaps the most bizarre of all. After seeing a UFO in the daytime perform some spectacular manoeuvres, it suddenly plunged into the sea by the famous Stack Rocks. Pauline took her kids with her to investigate this further from the cliff tops, and on the rocks below she saw two figures in silver suits, whom she estimated to be between 8 to 12 feet tall. She noticed a door in the rocks, where one of the figures emerged, and they moved around the base of the rock. After the figures returned through the door, it faded away and could no longer be seen. On returning home, Pauline received a call from her friend Rosa. Apparently, she had been looking at Stack Rocks with her binoculars and saw a silvery UFO fly into an entrance on the rock. Sometime later, silver-suited figures came out of the opening in the rock and climbed down to the sea and back again several times. Could be a secret base. Who knows? After one more sighting on the 19th of December 1977, the UFO activity came to an end at the Ripperston farmhouse. Did these events really happen? It would certainly seem so, but whether this involved aliens or advanced military equipment and personnel, we cannot say for sure. Considering these events happened more than 32 years ago and not that long after the moon landing, it seems unlikely that the military would have such crafts. We can only assume that a more advanced race was responsible for these sightings and were working with the knowledge of the military. If this is true, it supports the belief of a cover-up and indicates how long this has been going on. It also asks the question of why this is being kept a secret. Do aliens want to keep their presence a secret from the general public? Or do some of our leaders insist on this for personal gain? The fact that people are still reporting UFO sightings might suggest that if aliens are involved, they are not that worried about being spotted. However, the authorities take a much more defensive role and make every effort to keep information from us. It would be nice to think the authorities have our interest at heart in keeping this information secret, but knowing the government and politicians as we do, this is very unlikely, and we know this for a fact, don't we? There is a growing feeling on the internet that something major is about to break shortly on the subject of UFOs and aliens. So what's your personal view on this? Would this be good news? Or maybe not for everyone. Who knows? But I think what Pauline had actually seen was a UFO, an alien. But then again, I wasn't there, so... But like I said, read the book. It makes for a very good read. I think she actually did see something. And again, it doesn't mention the Men in Black here, but it is in the book. Have a little read. You won't be disappointed.